You've seen the scene 100 times. The lone survivor steps forward, raises the blade and cuts through the horde like a hot knife through a gas station protein bar. It looks incredible. It feels earned. And it is going to get you killed so fast, you won't even understand what happened. Let me ask you something. How many hours of sword training do you actually have? Not video game hours, not binge-watching hours. Actual physical, repetitive muscle memory hours with a blade in your hand against a moving target. If your answer is anything under 500 hours, congratulations. You just volunteered to be someone else's warning story. Because that confidence you're feeling right now looking at the sword on your wall, that's mistake number one. Here's what most people don't realize. The sword isn't a weapon, it's a skill set. And you don't have the skill set. Almost nobody does. Let's talk about why your favorite apocalypse fantasy is about to cost you everything. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell. Apocalypse Intel is where serious thinkers come to stress test their survival assumptions and get their illusions shattered for free. Don't miss an episode. Let's set the parameters so there's no confusion about the argument. Standard outbreak scenario. Fast walkers, not sprinters. Transmission through bite and direct fluid contact. You are not a trained soldier. You are not a kendo practitioner, fencer, or a historical martial arts devotee with a decade of drilling behind you. You are a regular person, maybe fit, maybe smart, definitely not a swordsman. You found a sword. Maybe it's a katana from someone's collection, a machete from a hardware store, or a saber from a pawn shop. It doesn't matter. The weapon's problem isn't the steel, it's you holding it. Now, let's destroy some myths. Mistake number one kills you before the zombies even do. You think a sword is a simple weapon. You think it works like a bat except sharper. You swing, you connect, done. That is not how this works. A proper sword strike requires shoulder rotation, hip engagement, footwork, blade angle control and knowledge of exactly where to cut, so the edge doesn't bind in tissue or bone. Here's the thing. Every zombie movie you've ever loved had a trained stunt performer behind that clean, effortless slash. The sword doesn't skate through a skull. It hits dense bone, rotates, catches, and stops your arm cold. And now you're off balance with a blade stuck in something that is still moving. Sounds reasonable until you're standing there pulling, and it isn't coming out. And the three behind it don't care about your physics problem. Mistake number two is weight. You've held a sword at a shop or a convention. You swung it once and thought, manageable. You were standing still, rested, calm, and doing it for 5 seconds. Now imagine doing that for 30 minutes. Real 30 minutes, not action movie 30 minutes. Running between positions, climbing over debris, dragging a supply bag, your heart rate already screaming from adrenaline. A katana runs between 2 and 3 pounds. A machete is similar. That doesn't sound like much until you factor in arm fatigue, grip degradation, and the fact that your brain is broadcasting at full volume while you try to hold form. By swing 15, your accuracy has dropped. By swing 30, you're slapping more than cutting. By swing 50, you are done when you're surrounded. Let's be real for a minute. This is where the action hero gets a second wind and wins anyway. You are not getting a second wind. You're getting a shoulder injury and an airway problem. Mistake number 3 is maintenance, and this one is sneaky. You found a sword, it's sharp. You think you're set. Here's what most people don't realize. A blade edge degrades with every single strike. Hit bone, microchips, hit concrete when you miss. Real chips hit a doorframe in a tight hallway. You just turned your razor edge into a butter knife. Keeping a blade combat ready requires whetstones, the skill to use them properly, and time. The rarest resource in an apocalypse. A gun runs out of ammunition. A sword runs out of edge. And unlike ammunition, you can't find a new edge in a sporting goods store. Do you know how to sharpen a blade to a working edge? Most people don't. And a dull sword requires more force, creates more fatigue, binds more often, and fails faster, at the exact moment you need it to work. Mistake number 4 is reach, or more precisely, the terrifying lack of it. You've thought about this. A sword keeps them at arm's length. Sword arm's length, you know what that is? About 2 to 3 feet. You know what can still bite you from 2 feet away? Everything with a mouth. A sword is not a spear. The moment it's fully extended, you are also extended. Weight forward, balance compromised, feet possibly wrong. One grab on the flat of the blade, which is exactly what happens when pain response is offline but motor function isn't, and you're being yanked into range. Here's where things get ugly in a different way. Groups. 1 zombie with a sword is a problem if you're untrained. 2 is a disaster. 3 is a closed-book quiz you didn't study for. A sword fights one axis at a time. You swing left, you expose your right. You cannot cover 360 degrees with a single blade edge. You cannot engage multiple vectors without opening yourself to flanking. A melee weapon with no reach and no projectile capability is a single-target tool in a multi-target environment. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. There is no safe distance in a melee. Every time you are close enough to cut, you are close enough to be grabbed. And in a world where one grab starts the clock on everything you have left, that math is brutal. Mistake number 5 sounds counterintuitive. Noise. Swords are quiet. That's supposed to be the point. Except they're not quiet in use. You grunt. You exhale hard on every swing. Your footwork scrapes concrete. And the blade itself rings when it hits anything that isn't the target. A wall, a doorframe, a filing cabinet. Metal on metal carries farther than you think, especially in buildings designed to channel airflow and amplify echo. You know what's actually quiet? A short, controlled blunt strike. A push with a long handle. Anything that keeps your breathing controlled and your body compact. But those aren't glamorous, so we'll continue. Let's talk real alternatives, because this isn't demolition for entertainment. The fix is boring, methodical, and effective. A hatchet runs short, hits hard per swing, and doesn't require the same edge maintenance to function. It's not cinematic. It works. A reinforced walking staff or heavy hiking pole keeps you further from bite range, doubles as a mobility tool over rough terrain, can be used in a push or sweep, and requires no sharpening whatsoever. Boring, effective, alive. A crowbar, and I cannot stress this enough, is one of the most tactically sound close-range tools available in any urban environment. It doesn't need sharpening, doesn't bind in bone, doubles as a breaching and prying tool, and is findable in almost any commercial or residential building. It doesn't make you look cool. It makes you look alive. That is better. The one bladed exception worth discussing is the short spear, and even then only for controlled engagements. The motion is a push, not a swing. It keeps the hands further from the target, doesn't require edge maintenance, and doesn't bind the way a sword does. Still requires practice, still has limitations, but geometrically far more functional for the primary zombie problem, which is keeping teeth away from skin. Here's what separates someone who survives an encounter from someone who doesn't. It's not the weapon. It's the decision architecture. It's choosing to move over choosing to fight. It's never letting it reach a point where the sword question is even relevant. If you have a sword, the only correct answer is that it's your absolute last resort. Your backup's backup. The thing you reach for when everything else has failed, including your legs, which means things have already gone catastrophically wrong. Your survival rating for leading with a sword as your primary weapon. 4 out of 10 for the first 24 hours. A generous 1 out of 10 for the first week. Short term, you might get lucky. Long term, fatigue, a group encounter, or one tight space mistake ends the story. The practical summary is this. You avoid swords not because they don't work. They work in trained hands with ideal conditions. You avoid them because you're not trained. Conditions are never ideal, and the apocalypse will not gift you the scenario that makes a sword shine. You carry a crowbar, a hatchet, or a long pole, and you use your legs before you use any of them. You don't fight if you can move. You don't move if you can hide. You don't get attached to weapons that require a decade of training you started yesterday. All right, your turn. Where's your sword right now? Wall decoration. When's the last time you swung it hard and felt your grip give out at swing 12? Be honest with yourself. Do you have a real alternative plan? A crowbar within reach? A route out that doesn't require a fight? A reason to never need that blade in the first place? Or are you banking on plot armor and a training montage that isn't coming? Drop your answer in the comments. Your primary weapon, your fallback, and your honest reason. Not the cool answer, the real one. And if someone down there says katana without a black belt to back it up, we all already know what we know. Apocalypse Intel is where survival fantasy meets survival reality, and reality wins every single time. Subscribe, hit the bell, and join the people stress testing their assumptions before the assumptions get them killed. Stay sharp. Just not with a sword.